will invite the bulldog, the first to present on the superintendent pharmacist in today's pharmacy law and ethics. Give him a round of applause as his client. Encourage him. You're welcome. Wow.
Olumide Akintayo is a proud alumnus of University of Ife, now Obafemi Awolowo University. He began his journey in pharmaceutical activism nearly 4 decades ago with the Pharmaceutical Society of Nigeria, Ondo State branch. His early dedication earned him a commendation during the 1988 Pharmacy Week, marking the start of a distinguished career in organized pharmacy. He later moved to the PSN Lagos State branch, where he served on the executive committee for an impressive 17 years, including roles as chairman and secretary, making him one of the longest-serving leaders in the branch's history. His legacy includes establishing a fully functional secretariat, now valued at over 750 million naira. A pioneer fellow of the West African Postgraduate College of Pharmacists in 1997, Akintayo has continued to shape the profession as a lecturer and examiner. He is also a fellow of the Nigerian Institute of Management and has served as a consultant to the National Assembly on pharmaceutical sector reforms. His extensive public service includes board roles with the Pharmacists Council of Nigeria and membership of key national health committees, including those on prescription policy and drug distribution under the Federal Ministry of Health. He also served on the board of University College Hospital, Ibadan. Akintayo's leadership journey within PSN culminated in his election as national president in 2012, after years of service on the National Council and National Executive Committee. During his presidency, he played a vital role in shaping policies that strengthened Nigeria's pharmaceutical manufacturing sector and improved access to medicines. An international figure, he has represented Nigeria at global platforms, including the International Pharmaceutical Federation, presenting over 80 papers and attending more than 1,000 conferences worldwide. Widely honored, he has been recognized among Nigeria's top professionals and men of integrity by leading national media. Today, he continues to influence healthcare policy and practice as CEO of Togmed Ventures Limited, while maintaining an active voice in national discourse. His family life evolved wholly in a female hostel with his lovely girls. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to present to you Pharm Olumide Akintayo, FPSN, past president, PSN.
Let me start on a note of gratitude by thanking the chairman of NAIP, my friend and brother, Mrs. Bankole, Zobo, and the NEC of NAIP for inviting me to present this paper at this landmark 29th Annual National Conference of NAIP. The past presidents here, the chairman of this occasion, the amiable and pleasant Ahmed Ibrahim Yakasai, and of course, my ally and friend in the many battles of pharmacy. Don't worry, as we came, I don't know that you're a professor, but as we came, I've been professor of community pharmacy for over 30 years. Time will not permit me to tell you how I became prof. I think we should share it. For many years, Opa was a member of the Education Committee of Council. And you know, that committee is usually dominated by deans of pharmacy. And so, every time these guys will introduce a Professor So, and then on one of the occasions we told them that I'm Azumi Keoko, Professor of Community Pharmacy. So I was actually the first Professor of Community Pharmacy in Nigeria. Esteemed fellows of the PSA, bearing the award winners of our state branches, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, because of time, you'll permit, please forgive me if I have skipped protocols. I want to especially welcome past chairman of NAIP, and I think there's an array of those past chairmen from Lulu, Benga, Ken. Those are the ones I can identify. So don't let me run into trouble. I align with the existing protocols. Let me just start by giving you what I think is Family Laws 01. Because we make reference to so many things, so I need to establish the basis. And let me start by welcoming you into the world of pharmacy jurisprudence. You know that the most supreme law in any country is the constitution of that country. And so in Nigeria, the most supreme document, if you are thinking of laws, remains the 1999 Constitution. Oftentimes, this constitutional framework is bracketized into so many jurisdictional scopes. And so in Nigeria, you have three major levels. Items that are classified on the exclusive list, those classified on what is called the concurrent list, and those on the residual list. Now, if you find anybody talking about the exclusive list, the very first thing that comes to mind is that matters on the exclusive list are matters that have been structured for only the National Assembly of the Federal Republic of Nigeria to legislate on. So, because it is only the federal government that has an ambit or a latitude of influence, then naturally it is only the executive arm of government through the various MDAs at federal level that can enforce laws enacted by the National Assembly. And then in terms of adjudication, it's only the federal courts that have a jurisdiction to legislate on anything that is on the exclusive list. That is why today in Nigeria, because drug matters are listed as item 21 in part 2, item 21 in part 1 of the exclusive list, everything pertaining to drugs can only be handled at federal level. So it means it's only the National Assembly that can legislate on drugs. So it's the only one. If the state assembly does it, it is unlawful, it is illegitimate, it will be thrown out if it is challenged in the courts. It is only, that is why it is only agencies like PCL, NAFDAC, NDLE, because they are federal agencies, those are the only ones that can regulate us. And of course, in terms of adjudication, if you're going to challenge anything PCL, NAFDAC, or any of these agencies, anything you pertain to an infringement, you can only challenge them with the Federal High Court. I hope you're following. Now, in similar spirit, a brand that is an agenda item has been on the concurrent list. It is the federal and the state governments that have a jurisdiction to legislate. If you remember, in 1979, for those of you who already followed as far back as that time, you remember that health matters, for instance, has always been listed on the concurrent list. That is why state governments, in addition to the federal government, can make laws at the level of NAS or state assemblies. That is why you discover that apart from pharmacy, most of the other health professions are actually regulated at state level, either through a private hospital registration authority or what they call all sorts of designations. So let me waste too much time on that. And then if you say an item is on the concurrent list, the federal, state, and local governments have jurisdiction. Those of you who are retail pharmacists, you will observe that also in few instances, local government personnel come into your pharmacy to regulate, and the more serious ones will seize items like wine, supermarket items, detergent and toiletry and all of those things. The reason is because local governments actually have a jurisdiction to regulate such items. I hope you understand. So if you do not want their trouble or nuisance value, you have to really consider whether it is worthwhile talking such merchandise. But basically, I think you get the drift, so that you will understand a few things about the law as we go on. In Nigeria today, you also know that there are a plethora of laws. We have a plethora of laws. Some of those laws are called pharmacy laws. There are two in existence. Pharmacy laws are broad general laws. We also have drug laws. Drug laws are a little more specific. They are interventions. In Nigeria, the two pharmacy laws we have now, and as we go down, you get to see that more. The two pharmacy laws we have today are the Poison Pharmacy Act, 535, Laws of the Federation 1990. And then you also have the recent PCN Act 2022 as amended. As we go on, I will also try to explain how we got to the PPA 535 of 1990. You know, let me try to handle this the way you will appreciate it. I will say pharmacy practice. Let's have the very first slide. I will say pharmacy practice is one that is subsumed in very substantial antiquity. As far back as 1878, the very first pharmacy law was actually enacted. 1878, the Lagos Pilotage and Arbor Ordinance. That was the very first of the laws. At that time, that law regulated healthcare practice and dispensing of medicines in ships that battered at the Lagos Harbor. And then it began to evolve. By 1881, we had the first hospital ordinance of 1881. And then 1889, we had the illegal dispensing rules in 1889. That evolution continued, and in 1902 we had the very first pharmacy ordinance, the full-fledged pharmacy ordinance. Now, if you look at the screen, you see the metamorphosis from 1902. We moved to 1923, 1927, 1936, 1958, and 1964. By 1964, we had what looked like the most potent of the various amendments of the Poison Pharmacy Act. This was also the first time we had full autonomy. Only registered members were listed as members of the erstwhile Pharmacists Board of Nigeria. We had another metamorphosis until we got to 1990, the Poison Pharmacy Act, Laws of the Federation 1990, which I told you still subsists. But two critical things we need to know. In 1991, we had the PCN Decree 91 of 1992, which later became P17 Laws of the Federation 2004 in the settings. But what's the most recent of the Pharmacy Act has done now in 2022 is that in section 69 of that law, of the new PCN Act, the Pharmacists Council decree that I just referred to as CAP 17 has now been completely repealed. And that means once the law is repealed, it has no power. It's no longer in existence. But section 70 of that same law will retain the Poison and Pharmacy Act CAP 535. So you see a very valid law in Nigeria. The only proviso now is that if there is an area of conflict between those two laws, the PCN Act 2022 takes precedence automatically. Now, it's also therefore very important to say all the laws that we have had from the military era, including these colonial laws that were never repealed, are still valid acts of parliament in Nigeria by virtue of section 315 of the 1999 Constitution. They are valid. But anyone that has been repealed, of course, ceases to be law. So, all the Poison and Pharmacy Acts before the 1990 version, from 1878 to 1964, have all been repealed. They have no effect in law. So, this takes me, therefore, since we have this background now, I can now, okay, so we can now begin to take this. That first slide we brought, we have put on here. You know, the first thing the PCN Act actually did was to change the nomenclature of the erstwhile Pharmacists Council of Nigeria to the Pharmacy Council of Nigeria. And you know, the only reason this was done was to make the mandate of PCN, it was designed and structured to become a more broad spectrum statutory mandate. Because there have always been contentions. The man says he's a pharmacy technician. Why should a Pharmacist Council be regulating it? The better medicine dealer also took things to court and all that. And so it became necessary to change all of this. One of the things you must appreciate about the PCN Act 2022 is that it is a compendium of law driven largely by PSN resolutions at AGM, and I'm drawing your attention to this as we go on. PSN resolutions as various AGM. A lot of input also came from the PCN registry, and at that time we also worked with the Nigerian Law Review Commission, and that was what came back to some of these things which your attention will be drawn to today. Can we go to page 3 of this so that we can save some time? 1990 to 2020. You know, I've been able to trace the law all the way from 1878 to 1990. Next slide, please. The one after this. Yes. Now, you know, I have been able to establish the validity of the PPA and 535 laws of the Federation 1990. Everything about superintending a pharmacy actually took root from this law, from the law we're making reference to here. Part 2, section 4.1 of the PPA CAP 535 1990. And that law says a selling dispenser or chemist shall in the month of January in each year send to the register a list of all the premises where his business, so far as it comprises the sales of drug, is being carried on, and the name of the selling dispenser or chemist having the personal control of the business on each premises. Now, what this law is simply saying, I'm sure you still remember forms B and D from elementary pharmacy laws in the university. Every pharmacist fills Form B to renew his license every year. Form J is the one you fill with regards to the premises. And what this law is just saying is that every year there is a legal responsibility and bonus in law that we must submit those documents in January of every year. Of course, the PCM has relaxed the deadline of January to tolerate a situation whereby people can still file as late as March. But in reality, this law says by January of every year you should turn in those documents. Next slide. Now, when you suppose the provision I just gave, you see that the law wisely gives serious responsibilities to community to superintendent pharmacists. Now, if you look at this is probably the biggest judgment that has ever been secured with regards to pharmacy practice in Nigeria. Because this is about the Supreme Court. This is the Supreme Court judgment. For many years, what was apparently happening was some pharmacists, in the guise of superintendent, would just put photocopies of the annual license in various pharmaceutical premises. And this got to a head in the 70s when the S1 Pharmacists Board of Nigeria decided to challenge the pharmacist who was always doing that. That's the famous anniversary. And that matter, when that matter got to court, judgment was in favor of the PDA, and anniversary challenged him at the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, in a landmark judgment in 1978, I think it's one of the few times, I'm not sure there's any other one can record in our books on jurisprudence. The Supreme Court, in its decision, and that's why I try to start from all this law so that you can understand, ruled on the basis of Section 37 of Cap 152, 1964, that that law allows a body corporate, company or firm to carry out business. That's this Cap 152 I'm referring to here, sorry. It was actually the 1958 version, not 1964. So it says a body corporate company or firm to carry out business or dispensary, chemist, druggist, or pharmacist. But the business must be carried out under laid down conditions which states to it under the direct personal control and management of the superintendent who is a pharmacist. Don't let me read for too long. That is why for those of you in the industry, because probably over 75% of the business and practice in the industry are not actually pharmacist owned, whether it's manufacturing, importation, whatever. This is the only reason that they can do that. This Supreme Court principle that says it's one man, one superintendent to one pharmaceutical premises. And that is where we derived it. It's a Supreme Court judgment. It's also vested or grounded in law. Section 1, Cap 152 of the PPA, PPA 1958, as it was there. That law has been repealed. But even when it was repealed, there is a Section 32 now of the existing PPA Cap 535 that still legitimizes this provision. So it remains valid within the purview of pharmacy laws. Next slide. Now, apart from the Supreme Court judgments of 1978, there's this famous Akeoki. I'm sure you remember this guy, Zubi. You should remember him. This was the ROM of the National Association of General Practice Employers. It's based in the Bible. He's a medical doctor. And this man was a bastion of resistance to every attempt to make only pharmacies and no retail premises in Nigeria. So he took this matter to court. Immediately we stopped registering non-pharmacists for business. He took this matter to court, and the courts, the federal high courts in Ibadan, relying on that same provision that I referred to from the Supreme Court, also ruled that if the man has a superintendent pharmacist, the Pharmacist Council of Nigeria, as it was called then, had a responsibility to allow him to run his business. But you know, because of development of this nature, you also have to make projections. That is why in today's most supreme pharmacy law, the PCN Act 2022, Section 27(3), Section 27(1), is clear that only pharmacists can own retail premises. The exception that was provided in Section 27(3) for chain pharmacies is also very well guided, so that the profession is protected at any time against this type of influence. But significantly, what you continue to see, irrespective of the version of the Portal Pharmacy Act that we go through, you see that there is still a strict liability that superintendent pharmacists must be in personal and direct control of pharmaceutical premises they manage. In fact, if you look at the PCN Act 2022, it goes ahead in the interpretation process you have in Section 71 to define who a superintendent pharmacist is, which is an improvement on all of these laws. And if you look at what the definition of a superintendent pharmacist is today, it's very clear. It says the superintendent pharmacist is that pharmacist who is in direct and personal control of the pharmaceutical premises. This is why fundamentally anybody who is not a community pharmacy practitioner can never superintend another pharmacy. Because the Supreme Court principle is simple. If you have more than one pharmaceutical job, how can you also be in direct and personal control? I hope I'm making sense. I also want to draw your attention to Section 2(1) of the Code of Ethics of the Pharmacy Profession, which posits that in every pharmacy there should be a superintendent pharmacist. Please move this to the next slide. There should be a superintendent pharmacist in personal control of the pharmacy. He shall be primarily responsible for the observance of proper standards of professional conduct in regards to the operations of the pharmacy. For the proper observance of this duty, the superintendent pharmacist must do the following. Please see this. This is the only time I probably read this. And what you are expected to do in observance of your duty as superintendent pharmacist includes: 1. Ensure that you are in direct charge of the day-to-day running of the pharmaceutical premises. 2. Ensure that the premises are run in a proper manner, legally, pharmaceutically, and ethically. C. Take personal responsibility of the outcome of the activity in the premises under him, whether the act or omission is by him or another person. As we go on, you see clearly that a superintendent pharmacist is structured to be the chief clinical governance officer of any pharmaceutical premises. You see that clearly as we go on. D. Ensure that his attendance at the premises at all times is sought to give him substantial personal control over the business for a substantial part of the time. That's what the ethics talks about. I hope we are following. Can you hear me at the back? Yes. All right. So, now this remains a dispensation from 1990 to 2022. I'd like to draw your attention now to what is prevalent from the PCN Act 2022. You know, I told you a lot of the things you have in this law now are creations of resolutions of president conferences, litigations by PSA, they are directed to the PCN registry and all that. So it's my pleasure therefore to draw your attention to two quick developments that propel section 29 of the current PCN Act 2022. Let's have the next slide. Now, I branded it a new rule. In 1996, at the PSN National Conference in Ilorin, major PSN activists, or PSNs as I branded, continue to look at developments in our hospital sector. In particular, you know, the norm was to restrict inspection, registration to the private sector, community pharmacy and industry. Nobody taught the hospitals, whether private or public. People just did whatever they liked. And so in 1996, a certain one I didn't remove the motion, I seconded it there, that hospitals in Nigeria who probably use more drug products, do bigger volume and turnover than those of us in private should also be inspected and registered. And so when we had the opportunity, it became law in section 29. This is, of course, was not without challenge. The Guild of Medical Doctors challenged this matter at the Federal High Court Lagos, and in a landmark ruling in October 2007, one of the finest judgments we ever got from courts. The Federal High Court Lagos in October 2007 ruled that indeed the Pharmacists Council of Nigeria, as it was then called, a body corporate to the Federal Ministry of Health, is even the word, or it's continuous, has a specific appropriation in law to regulate and control pharmaceutical premises, not just in the public sector, but in both the public and private sector. So that gave us the leeway to now make it a lawful thing. So if you look at section 29 today of the PCN Act 2022, it has now established that every pharmaceutical premises is under the direct supervision of a superintendent pharmacist. Every pharmaceutical premises. Perhaps you also have a section 23 that also consolidates the spirit in section 29(1), because it says every pharmaceutical premises, whether in a public or private hospital, must have a superintendent pharmacist. To make you appreciate the very strong impact of section 29, I will charge you to try to look at that law. The most significant and fundamental provision in the PCN Act 2022 is a certain section 22. We don't have it here, but let me just tell you what section 22 of that law says, because it was section 22 that is really the precursor to having a section 29 of this nature. Section 22 says in Nigeria as a country, in any place where you stock, dispense, sell, market, import, manufacture, export, or even have a scientific office, such places must be inspected, must be registered, and must be licensed from the Pharmacy Council of Nigeria. Do you understand the far-reaching effect or implication of that law? That law is saying, and you know, many times we have these powers, we don't use them. That law is simply saying that if you keep that table, Mr. Chairman, is beautifully decked. If you have if you need to keep one packet of paracetamol in that place, it must be registered by the pharmacy council. And if it is going to be registered by pharmacy council, what is the first step? You must have a superintendent pharmacist. I've always said at other fora that if Section 22 is very well implemented, because everybody must have a superintendent pharmacist, it creates over 100,000 new jobs for pharmacists. There will be a new scrum for superintendent pharmacists in Nigeria. Because except if the PCN gives you exemption orders, once you stock any drug anywhere, then you must have a pharmacy. So, all the various parastatals or even the government at federal and state levels should logically follow this. But many times, we tend to wait for PCN to do everything. So we tell the state branches, if you see an advert in the newspaper from a private hospital that is talking about the aberrations are actually getting more and more, getting seriously out of hand. In the past, what we used to see was government or the private hospitals, they will advertise for patients because they don't want to pay pharmacists. But it's getting a little more dangerous. And that's why pharmacists need to rise to tackle this challenge of superintending pharmacies. You know, in recent times, if you see one of the aberrant outputs we have is that some pharmacists are beginning to talk about licensing fees and things like that. Now, these things are not lawful because they are not from the PCA. What that is beginning to do, especially in the private sector, is that it has brought R&D back to the front burners. And so people pay licensing fees and they have a superintendent pharmacist. And instead of employing pharmacists, you see adverts now. Check pharmacy platforms, I'm sure you see it. People clamoring for pharmacologists. They started with pharmacologists, but it's deteriorating. They now talk about microbiologists, biochemists, zoologists, any science graduate. And because the payment plan or pattern is low, cheap, it is very, very attractive. And it is gradually becoming a confederation, a consuming fire of great voracious appetite that can wipe out the remains of our profession if we are not careful. So, I believe I have tried to establish the basis and the need for superintendent pharmacists. Let me therefore go on in a few minutes so that we can close this to now establish global responsibility of superintendent pharmacists and then narrow it to what we have in Nigeria. Can you move on to the next slide, please? You know, the superintendent pharmacist, like I said earlier on, is the pharmacist legally responsible for how a pharmacy company or a pharmaceutical premises runs its professional and pharmaceutical related activities. The superintendent pharmacists, like I said, are basically the chief clinical governance officers for the practice or business. In most countries, including Nigeria, the UK, Ireland, superintendent pharmacist's role is written into law to protect public health. So, the wide range of these responsibilities include regulatory compliance. When you talk about regulatory compliance, you're saying the superintendent pharmacist must ensure you obey, you comply with all the laws emanating from the various regulatory agencies, PCN, NAFDAC, NDA. Those are the principal regulatory agencies in the value chain of drug distribution in Nigeria. Let me drop this. For those of you who are in the industry, because this is a conference of industrial pharmacists, you really need, the superintendent pharmacists need to step in. You know, because no matter how big that pharmaceutical company is, the person who conveys the health to all its operations is the superintendent pharmacist. So if anything goes wrong, that's the very first thing that we have. You have a duty to monitor and ensure that everything runs well from the level of the production lines to the end, to the final end, which is the market. So you really need to step up the game. And the other things you want to do in terms of those responsibility, pharmacy management, patient care, staff supervision, quality assurance, licensing and registration. So here are the key ways superintendent pharmacists also ensure health safety. One, setting and enforcing safe systems. I will send this paper to NAIP so you will be able to do more studies if you find it necessary. Medicine safety and supply chain integrity. Governance beyond the floor of the premises. Staffing levels. You must ensure appropriate numbers of suitably trained personnel to sustain the operation. Record keeping and compliance, very, very important. Patient-centered care and public health initiatives. Here are the specific PCN requirements for superintendent pharmacists in Nigeria. Of course, this is available everywhere, and so I'm sure you can always, you will always have access to it. But I want to draw your attention to this eligibility trust to be a superintendent pharmacist, especially that part that talks of one job rule. One job rule. Please move that to the next slide. That one job rule says superintendent pharmacists must undertake to the effect that he or she has only one pharmaceutical job. I'm sure you observe this is PCN ensures you do that. You can't be superintendent pharmacist from two or more premises. You can only be superintendent pharmacist from one. And the reason they do this is that is an indirect way of holding you accountable for all possible infractions in the premises. The responsibility the superintendent pharmacist must accept because we are winding down now. One, direct personal control and management of all pharmaceutical premises. Compliance with PCN, NAFDAC standards, premises practice and personnel. Premises registration and retention. The license is tied to the source of the register. Inspection PSN has specific guidelines, and I'm sure Professor Amina will take over from wherever I stop now will draw more attention into that. Other requirements tied to superintendent pharmacists for pharmacists, for pharmaceutical premises that are not retail, wholesale, distribution, manufacturing, you must have a pharmacist on board of directors. So let me conclude. Let me conclude by saying the superintendent pharmacist is both the legal head and the one who ensures day-to-day professional standards. If the MD, that's the CEO of the company, interferes with the professional matters, the superintendent pharmacist undertaking letter is the legal basis to push that. Let me read that again. That's why I drew attention to it when I was talking about eligibility to be superintendent pharmacist. If anybody, a director of the company or the MD, interferes with professional inclined matters, the superintendent pharmacist undertaking letter is the legal basis to push back. This makes superintendent pharmacists very vulnerable personnel. Times of infraction or unethical misconduct conducted by company with superintendents. The pharmaceutical industry in particular sets its own benchmark to determine the eligibility criteria for persons who can be superintendent pharmacists in the sector as a clear indication of its commitment to quality assurance. What am I saying? The tendency these days is for big companies. When I say big companies, major manufacturers or importers. In order to circumvent effective oversight regulations, oftentimes they go for young, inexperienced pharmacists. I do know that, well, I've been chairman of the Brand Ethics Committee of Council, and I can remember that we set standards. At one time, we were even saying for you to be on the board of the manufacturer, you must be a fellow of the PSA, or one over 25 years postgraduate experience. Sometimes you think, at least for the younger ones, you have a tendency to think, oh, these people are overbearing. But the truth is, these people prefer you because they are just entrepreneurs and investors whose only motive is making money from your license. So you need very experienced senior pharmacists to take up some of these responsibilities so that you can have a good oversight responsibility. This is the last that I will drop this out to you. The job of a superintendent pharmacist has been seriously undermined in this policy. Because even some people who are superintendent pharmacists don't even know the tremendous power that they have and the true will. And I'd like to close by drawing your attention to what one German theologian did say many years ago in his classic poem, First they Came. And it was like, first they came for the Jews. They came for the Jews to destroy them. And I did not do anything about it because I was not a Jew. Then they came for socialists. I did not do anything because I wasn't a socialist. Then they came for communists. I did not do anything because I wasn't or I am not a communist. And then they came for me. And that's what's happening to us in pharmacy. They came for me and there was nobody to defend me because we did not protect all the other levels that have been violated. Thomas Paine says, if you fail to defend and protect the liberty of other people, yours will ultimately be threatened and taken away from you. Once again, let me thank the organizers of this conference. Thank you so much for inviting me.
On behalf of the chairman of the Association of Industrial Pharmacies, the chairman of the board of trustees, and the very distinguished members of the board and past chairmen who are surrounded here, we present this plaque to you from Olumide Akintayo, past president, for the good job you've done in making yourself available and freely offering your experience to this audience. You have become a very significant contributor to pharmacy in Nigeria. And this is an additional award to confirm that your work is appreciated. Congratulations.
Orindowo.